On this episode of Let's Talk About Abortion, Ayala Harrison shares her powerful story of choosing life after being raped.
I find it pretty insulting, honestly, to use women like me and our children as political fodder for their narrative, and it's mostly for economic gain.
Like you said, people do call it a rape baby often, or the monster's baby. And I like to tell people, that's a survivor's baby, and that is just as much her baby as it is his baby.
Join the conversation now and learn how you can support women recovering from trauma.
I'm Christine Yergin, and this is Autumn Higashi.
And we want to sit down to have an honest conversation about this topic in our culture, because we know the state of our culture. We know the misinformation that revolves around abortion. And so we decided to let go of that, to sit down with real people who have real stories so that we can have honest discussions. So if you want to introduce who we are speaking to today.
Yes, today we have special guest Ayala with us, who is an actual survivor of rape, who is here to debunk the narrative that's out there. And this is one of the most used things that they push for abortion with. They say, what about the instances of rape? And so we brought somebody who can talk about that firsthand. So Ayala, do you want to come join us? Start by telling us a little bit about yourself. Who is Ayala? We'll get into the story in a little bit, but who is Ayala?
So I'm Ayala. I am 19 years old. I am a college student at a local community college in North Carolina. I was born and raised just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. And I've been a passionate pro-life activist for the last couple years. It's been the most important thing in my life thus far, and I'm looking to pursue a career within politics so I can continue advocating for the preborn.
Why would you say that you are pro-life? Like, what is it that made you want to be pro-life?
I would say that mostly it was my experiences of conceiving my child from sexual assault and having to reckon with the reality of the humanity of the preborn, which is something we don't as a society often have to think about. Yeah, I think that even, stories like yours, they're used as talking points. And, while they're using it as a way to share real stories, they're actually neglecting the people that are really involved. And so, for somebody who is pro-abortion or somebody who's pro-life who's heard this argument, from your perspective, how does it feel for, instances of rape and sexual assault to be used as a justification and a reason why abortion is not only okay, but a good thing? Right. So when I conceived my daughter, it was after 4 years of being horrifically abused. I was raped more times than I can count, and I was 15 years old when I got pregnant. So I understand the situation very, closely. The one that they're describing of a young girl who gets pregnant from an abusive situation. I know what they're talking about. And I find it pretty insulting, honestly, to use women like me and our children as political fodder for their narrative. And it's mostly for economic gain for the abortion industry. I find it insulting because I think it's speaking over women like me and our children, the dignity and humanity of our children. I think that especially when I talk about my experiences, I've found that they care very little about what women who have been through these situations actually feel about what happened to us. A lot of us do feel that our children were human beings and deserving of dignity. I've been shouted down so many times by women and men who have not experienced pregnancy or rape or sexual assault, none of the things I had to experience. But because I have the wrong narrative, I have the wrong opinion about what happened to me, that's an unacceptable opinion. So they don't really care that much about us as people. They care about using our narrative to push their narrative, and that's pretty insulting.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm so sorry that happened to you. But what I often find in situations like this is that they're kind of piggybacking off of the trauma of rape victims in order to push their narrative, because we have all, I'm sure in multiple debates that we've had with other people who were pro-abortion, said, okay, well, what if we outlaw all abortions, but just leave the exceptions of rape that you're talking about? And oftentimes they say,
It's not enough.
yeah, that's not it. Keep going. And that kind of makes you realize they're not I'm sure they care to some degree, right? But it feels like they're just using your trauma as a means to promote the agenda that they want promoted. Would you say that's the case of what you kind of experienced? I'm sure people have said this debate to you and you're like, well, actually, can you give us an instance of something like that?
When I was outside of the Supreme Court after they just overturned Roe v. Wade, I was having a conversation with a young woman, and the first thing she brought up, and I find this very funny, like every time I talk to a pro-abortion person, the first thing they talk about is women who get pregnant from rape. And this is very funny to me because I can immediately say what I'm going to say. So I tell this girl, well, I got pregnant from rape when I was 15 and I loved my baby and I felt she was deserving of life. And she completely changed her demeanor and she said, "You're disgusting. That's disgusting." Wow. And I honestly, people have said some very nasty things to me before, but seeing in real time on someone's face, someone seeing my child and my love for my child as something disgusting because of my rape, as if any of that was my fault or my child's fault, as if that somehow rubbed off on us and we became dirty from that. It was heartbreaking, honestly. And I think that that's the way a lot of these people feel about women like me. And I think that it is proof that a lot of the women they put out and a lot of the narratives they put out about sexual assault and abortion, it is incredibly performative and it's incredibly pandering, and it's not honest in any way, shape, or form because of the way they treat women like me who are pro-life and who did conceive that way. Yeah, I know from my own experience, I've been to dozens of protests and rallies, and I know you have been too. And typically that is the most common thing that I hear. And so regardless of what my sign says, regardless of the chant coming out my mouth, that is what they decide to ask questions about and focus on. And it's always, how can you have such little sympathy for somebody in that situation? So would you say that also is something that you hear often? And, do you ever see a positive shift in their demeanor? If somebody is using that talking point and you share your experience, have you ever faced any sort of change in a positive way of how they're treating you and how they're speaking to you? I have had women, once I reveal that I'm a survivor of sexual assault, kind of calm down a little bit because it's something they can relate to, or it's something that they feel as a woman, it's a woman's struggle. A lot of women feel that way. And so it sometimes does kind of help smoothen the conversation and we can have, a real talk instead of screaming at each other. And sometimes the complete opposite happens and they shut down because they're not ready to view the situation that way. They're just not ready. So it really it does depend a lot of the time.
Can I ask you, there are people probably watching who hear this all the time, and you have a very good rebuttal with being able to say, no, let me actually talk to you about this because I've experienced this.
Yeah.
For somebody who may not have experienced sexual assault, how would you suggest that they argue this point when it's given to them by somebody who's pro-abortion?
Right. I would honestly just ask them, what do you think abortion does for rape victims? What do you think it does for them? Because a lot of people haven't really, I guess, thought this out that much, but they kind of subconsciously assume that once you take away the rape baby, which is a term that I don't appreciate, from the situation, that suddenly that makes the situation better. No, you have rape trauma that's going to be there for as long as it was going to be there if there wasn't a baby. That needs to be dealt with therapy. That needs to be dealt with in a mental health setting. The abortion has nothing to do with healing from the rape, at all. So I guess that is the best argument that I have against it. I can't see any way in which it is healing or progress in any way for that woman, that survivor like me, to go to an abortion clinic, to be strapped down on a table, to have her child violently taken from her, which is often very traumatic, and then to be dumped on the side of the road and the clinic tell her okay, call us if something happens or whatever. That's not healing. None of that sounds healing to me. None of that sounds like what a survivor would want to feel after being sexually assaulted. In fact, to me, abortion does sound very similar to what it feels like to be sexually assaulted.
Wow. Have you connected with other survivors of sexual assault through this process and learned similar things that they think the same way?
I've had a lot of women reach out to me and say, thank you for talking about this because I was never able to talk about this. I've had women who had abortions after being sexually assaulted contact me and say that I really helped them understand and put words to the emotions that went along with that experience that they just kind of buried. A lot of them do feel so much pain in regards to what happened. And they share with me that they feel the same way, that once their baby was gone, it didn't help anything. It actually made everything a lot worse. So and that's because you have additional trauma. I had trauma from I miscarried when I lost my baby, but these women have trauma from when they lost their baby and abortions they were forced and pressured into very often. And it doesn't do anything for them positive.
Yeah. I think another perspective that's not spoken about is, this devastating reality is that many women who do suffer in that way choose abortion. But you have to ask the question, why? It's because the only narrative you hear is that it's going to cause more pain, that nobody wants to have a child, from a situation of abuse, and that everyone, wants to have an abortion and should have an abortion. Rarely do you hear the stories of, a devastating reality of sexual abuse, and then the child that they decided to keep and love and, either place for adoption or to raise themselves. You don't hear that narrative. And so I'm sure every woman, regardless of their age or the situation that we're in, are probably thinking, well, this is just what I do. This is what everyone does in this situation. Nobody else in my situation is choosing life for their child because it's just going to hurt. It's a bad decision. That's what everyone around me is telling. And so, I'm sure that you've resonated with people all across the country in your social media and rallies, and people hearing your story. I'm sure it speaks to them louder than you're even aware of. Whether those who are still healing or those who did choose life for their baby and can relate to that feeling of love and adoration towards the life that was created. And so I think your voice is absolutely important in this culture, and to bring awareness to this topic, but also to bring comfort and healing to those who have similar stories to you.
Yeah, I have to say I'm so impressed by you. I actually met Ayala during a filming of another video in LA. We won't say the name of the video, but it was, pro-abortion people against pro-life people, and she was so solid. And she shared her story. She's like a little firecracker, and I was like, who is this girl?
Thank you.
What would you say to other women who have been sexually assaulted and become pregnant and think that that's their only option, that they have to end the life of that child? Because like you said, people do call it a rape baby often, or the monster's baby. And I like to tell people, that's a survivor's baby, and that is just as much her baby as it is his baby. What would you tell a woman who is in that circumstance?
First of all, I definitely agree with you that even more so, like, you're the one growing the baby. You're the one carrying it. You're the one giving birth to it. It's your baby. And I would say that, first and foremost, I understand exactly how you feel. And a lot of women don't like being told that, but look, I know what it feels to feel like an animal trapped in a cage. Like, there's no way out of this situation. You are stuck here. It is painful. It is scary. You just want to get out of it. And I know what it feels like to be willing to do something you wouldn't normally be comfortable doing because you just need to escape. You need to stop being hurt like this. But I would also say that the ramifications of losing that baby are going to last a lifetime. And you can report your abuser, you can become safe from your abuser, you can escape what happened without ending the life of your baby because those consequences are forever. You can't undo that. I would also say that when I was pregnant with Rachel, which is my baby's name, I saw a flyer for a crisis pregnancy center, and it really helped me realize there were people who wanted to help me, really desperately. And I would say that, if you just reach out and ask for help, there are so many people, especially within the pro-life community, but in general, people do want to help you in this situation, and you have to reach out and ask for it. But I would say that you always have a choice. Abortion is not your only option. Do not let anybody tell you that. Not your boyfriend, not your mom, not your abuser, not anybody in the situation, because ultimately it's your choice. You can keep that baby. You can do it.
Yeah, well, a lot of times that's the problem. A lot of people think it is their only choice.
Yeah.
And oftentimes they make that choice or feel that they have to make that choice because they're pressured by maybe somebody saying that this is a rape baby, or how could you, you're going to see your face or the abuser's face in that maybe, how could you raise that? Or, it's finances or housing or, food on the table, daycare, all of that. I don't know of any situation where I've ever heard of a woman saying, I just want to have an abortion for fun. Usually there's a bigger circumstance. And in this case, yours is a very big circumstance. And I'm so grateful that you're here to share this story and to be able to tell people who have experienced this, like, hey, it's not your only choice. And I'm here and I survived this and you can too. And we're here to love you and support you. And I just am so impressed by you and you sharing this story so boldly at such a young age. I'm an old lady, but you have a fierceness and your testimony is beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. I just had, I'm thinking, from my perspective as somebody who's in the pro-life movement and, we are working to fight against abortion, to prevent abortion, to love those who have had abortions. And so I'd love to hear your perspective on how can somebody who can't relate support those, whether they're in their lives or if somebody reaches out to them. What is the best way to be sensitive but honest and truthful about what abortion is, and to how do we meet women where they're at and show them that we are supportive without adding more pressure to their lives? Because I think sometimes people may pull back a little bit because we can't fully relate. We don't fully know what it feels like. But we want to be there to support and make sure that they know that they're not alone. So what do you think the best way for a pro-life advocate to be that person for somebody who may have suffered from sexual assault and finds themselves pregnant?
That's a great question. I know that rape is a heavy word and it scares a lot of people, but I do want to be straight up about the fact that women who are pregnant from sexual assault need help. And you have to be there even if it's uncomfortable for you. Right. That is not the priority. And I would say that it's important that the pro-life movement is trauma-informed, so they understand what rape and sexual assault does to the woman, how she's going to react to things, how it's going to make her uncomfortable with certain things. And you just have to be okay with that and work with her on that. After being sexually assaulted, there are so many things that change about you and you might seem erratic, and it's important for people to understand that. I would say that putting more effort into reaching out to these women directly, being more vocal about the issue of sexual assault and talking about pregnancy from sexual assault in a positive way, affirming that these women do have options, offering them specifically to these women, I think that would go a long way. Because often it's just sort of like, oh, we have pregnancy resources, if you want them.
Feels surfaced.
Yeah.
And you can come to us.
Yeah, you can come to us.
How would we find them?
Yeah.
If they're offering these to these women, would we partner with organizations or something along those lines that work with women who have been abused in that way? Or because you can't, it's just like finding a pregnant woman. Oftentimes if she doesn't get a pregnancy resource center. So what is the best way for us to connect with them so that we can tell them we love you and we're here for you and we want to walk alongside you?
I would say a great way, and a way that ensures it's trauma-informed care, so it's not re-traumatizing her, is partnering, again, like you said, with organizations that do work with survivors. A lot of survivors get legal help, or they report through organizations. I reported through an organization because I was a minor, so I didn't go directly to the police. And I went through them for reporting, and they offered me resources in the local area. So I think that working with those organizations and saying hey, if these women or these girls are pregnant, here are the resources we offer specifically for women who are pregnant from sexual assault. Here's our trauma-informed care. Here is our therapist. Here is our, people who have licenses. Right. And I think that makes them feel a lot safer and a lot more seen, because you're not just saying pregnant women. You're saying I see you, I understand what you've been through, and we are qualified to help, and we want to help you. We care about you specifically. I think that makes a world of difference.
Yeah, and I think it also can prevent the misconception that it's oh, I'm going to see through you and just care about your baby.
Right.
Because I think that sometimes that can add a layer of hurt of you don't really care, because what's the misconception? That we hate women and we only want to protect babies. And if we're not informed and fully aware of the situation and know how to navigate that conversation, I can see it kind of going straight past her in a way that makes her feel even more alone. And so I think that, yeah, your perspective on the importance of informed care and the resources for her and her mental health and her physical well-being, as well as resources for her to choose life, is so important.
Yeah, Ayala, thank you so much for sharing your story with us and sitting down with us today. I think it's powerful and a lot of people need to hear it. And like I said, when I met you, you were a firecracker and fighting for life. And you're like, nope, you're not going to use that one against us. I'm going to tell you why. And I'm going to snap my fingers all over you guys. Thank you so much for joining us. It has been an absolute pleasure. And we hope to have you back soon.
Thank you so much for listening.